We left off by talking about the idea that we all have social information progressive biases, and that comes from the experience we had in childhood and adolescence with popularity. Our peers from back when we were kids are still affecting how we see things, how we interpret things that what we want and the behaviors that we engage in this day. What we're going to talk about now are a couple of very commonplace that we see in the research literature that really tell us a lot about why some kids with peer Specifically, this is referring to the Q interpretation phase. But what we found is that people with a hostile attribution bias that actually affects all the different areas of social information processing. And here is how we study it with young kids. Kids might look at a little picture like this, and they read a story. This one says, imagine you're sitting at a lunch table at school, eating lunch. You look up and you see another child coming over to your table with a carton of milk. You turn around to eat your lunch, and the next thing that happens is that the child spills milk all over your back. And then that information can be coded. Most people will say that it was an accident. The milk probably spilled and that's how the milk all got on the back and it's okay. That was done because that kids were being mean and because they are trying to get milk all over me. Here's another scenario. Imagine you brought your new toy to school today. You save up money to buy the toy and you want to show it to the other kids at school. You let another child play with it for a few moments while you go get a drink of water. When you get back, you see that child was broken your brand new toy. Again, a lot of people would say, why would the child have broken the toy on purpose? It was an accident. Somehow it has happened. But some kids it turns out that kids with a hostile attribution bias during childhood and also that you grow up, they tend to have a beast or destroyed way of experience all the social information processing steps. So if you ask kids to look at a picture or watch a video, you ask them to tell you what you saw. Hostile attribution-based kids will selectively see the things in their visual field that suggest an aggression, even if you control for how aggressive these kids were prefers. You find that kids who were affected by peers develop irreversibility to have this hostile, and they fail to see positive things in front of them. Kids are maybe laughing or playing with each other. So when presented with an intuition situation, but why did someone walk by and their shoulder bumped your shoulder? They would say they did it on purpose. It was to be mean and everyone else would probably not think that. So in other words, we're holding constant to Q interpretation. They're kids with a hostile attribution bias, they're more likely to come up with very aggressive scenarios. So their goals would be, I want to get back at them. There are ways in which people who are wrong, whether in the workplace or whether in a romantic pairship, with desire especially to try and get back at them. So something that we are seeing stemming from hostile attribution bias. Even when we say to some people we want to hold constant your goals for clarification. People with a hostile attribution bias would say, well, the way that I would do that is. And they would list a whole bunch of aggressive responses. I would yell all. And even if you give someone to answer, if they say, let's think of a way that you could settle an argument in the most calm, healthy way, something that would help you engage in relationships, this person. Now we are going to do a role play. So that would test the response and acting phase. But we're giving them the responses selection. People, children, adolescents, and adults with a hostile attribution bias have a harder time with the role play. And they tend to end up doing things that are a little bit aggressive anyway. Maybe this is true. Maybe you know somebody out there that has a hostile attribution bias. Maybe it's you. The way that we see is adulthood. Of course, we don't see people kind of breaking each other up as much. That's something you see a little bit more in childhood and adolescence. But you see people that tend to act aggressively. We do see towards kids that people with a hostile attribution bias tend to also aggressive towards other children emotionally or physically. We also see this in ways that are a little bit more subtle. So, for instance, in the workplace, we see that people with hostile attribution bias grow up to assume that you've been kids of blown off by their course when someone might innocently forget to credit a coworker with an accomplishment. They see that as being a specific attack as something that happens off purpose. They were left out. It was due to some way they were being used or someone was trying to put them down and thought their ability to be done in the rock. As a result, there are folks that don't tend to do as well at work. They come late, they leave early. Research shows that they're more likely to steal office supplies. They badmouth the workplace to other people and they're even more likely to quit. We even now have some research to show that there may be intergenerational effects. So if the same adults that have a hostile attribution bias grow up to become parents, then what we find is it changes the way they are parents and it changes their kids. Nicole Ward did a research study where she looked at moms who has hostile attribution bias. When they were given scenarios, you asked to interpret what was happening between two children, and they got all that information from moms, and then they found out how the kids were doing by asking these kids teachers to complete an assessment of how aggressive their kids were. Moms tended to think that kids were more likely to be nice towards their children. So, in other words, when they were asked to interpret a scenario in which the kids were interested which other kids, and something that most people would think there was a nature exchange was occurring, these moms thought that was really happened was that other kids were testing their son or daughter and they tended to respond in a way that made them feel like they needed to protect their children or they needed to fight back for their children. They were more likely to think their children were being hostile towards them, towards the parent or purpose. And of course, you can imagine that changes a lot about how that kids would then be raised or how that mom feels about being a mom. Also, what happened is that moms with a hostile attribution bias, they tended to be kids that their kids tended to grow up to be more aggressive. The teachers in the response reported that same kids were one of the moms who had a hostile attribution bias and tended to be more physical and more acceptable when it came to scenarios that most kids tended to not have as many problems with. So that's just one example of type of bias that we see happen in childhood and adolescence that tends to have an effect on the way that we experience things all our lives across different contexts.